Good morning, everyone. It's Tom Richards. I'm the Assistant Chief Constable for the Kent and Essex Serious Crime Directorate. Thank you for coming today.
Let's start off Library 101. Are you recording this conference in Kent?
Julia was a PCSO Police Crime Support Officer who served with Kent Police from 2008. She started in a crime reduction role and more recently worked with victims of domestic abuse in Canterbury. She was a hugely devoted, passionate individual who was completely committed to serving the people of Kent. She will be hugely missed and lost by her colleagues. My heartfelt thoughts go out to her family, her friends, and of course her colleagues. In terms of the investigation, Kent Police were called shortly after 4 o'clock on Tuesday of this week to the edge of Ackholt Wood on the outskirts of Snowdon Village. That is where we found Julia. She was deceased. The Serious Crime Directorate have commenced a murder investigation. We do not at this stage have any identified suspects. We are keeping all options open to us while we fully investigate the circumstances of this matter and try to understand exactly what happened. We do not at this stage understand the motive for this attack. I would like to appeal, please, for witnesses. Many local and wider members of the community have come forward with incredibly useful, important information that is helping us piece together what happened on Tuesday. If anybody else saw anything suspicious or strange on Tuesday or Wednesday of this week, we're very, very anxious to speak to them. We're very, very grateful for the support that we've received from the local community. They've been incredibly patient. We have a lot of police officers in the location. That will continue into the weekend while we continue our investigations and we continue our searches seeking evidence. I do understand that local residents are concerned. That's completely natural. As stated, I do not at this stage have an identified suspect. We do not know what the motive for this attack is. I would urge people, if they have any concerns, to report it to Kent Police immediately. People should be cautious and aware of their surrounding circumstances and situation. Julia was not on duty at the time of this incident. She was not in uniform. As with many people in the current climate, she was working from home that day. She was walking her dog, as I say, out of uniform, and we're still seeking to establish exactly what happened. A post-mortem took place on Thursday of this week, and I can confirm that she died as a result of serious head injuries. Thank you.
Right, questions, everyone? In the middle, BBC, please.
Helena Wilkinson, BBC News. Are you the person who attacked Julia James may have been someone who she came across in her line of work?
It is, of course, a possibility, but we are considering all options. We're remaining completely unblinkered. We're considering all possible motivations and all possible options. So we certainly have not established that at this stage.
Michael Keogh, BBC Radio Kent. You said that she died of significant head injuries. Is there any signs that she faced perhaps a robbery? Was her possession still with her? Her purse, her phone? What more can you tell us about the circumstances in which you found her?
There's no evidence that any of her possessions were missing. She was, as I say, walking her dog at the time. Her dog was at the scene unharmed when police arrived.
Rebecca Barry from ICD News. Are you investigating whether this attack was sexually motivated?
As I say, we're keeping our options completely open in terms of motivation. That is, of course, a consideration, but it's much too early at this stage. We're still trying to piece together exactly what happened to establish motive.
You said that people should be aware of their surroundings. Would you categorically say to women in particular, do not go out at night at the moment?
No, I would not say that. I would encourage people to be cautious, to be vigilant, to be aware of their surroundings, to report anything of concern to Kent Police. We're very, very interested in that, but no, I'm not specifically advising women or anyone for that matter to stay at home or to avoid any particular locations. But until we understand exactly what has happened and why it's happened, of course I understand why people will be concerned.
BBC South East. Can you tell us anything about the weapon used?
She has died from blunt trauma to the head. I'm not in a position, it wouldn't be appropriate for me to speak about precise weapons while we examine the circumstances.
Julia James, it must be obviously really difficult for your force. I assume there are people working on this who knew her as well.
Yes, of course I've had to consider the welfare of staff, as we do with all traumatic incidents, but it's particularly challenging and poignant for staff working on the case who knew her professionally or potentially, of course, socially. So I am working very carefully to ensure that all of my teams are fully supported throughout this investigation in terms of the psychological impact of the circumstances and, of course, if they attended the scene itself.
From the Sun newspaper. Was this a attempted dog napping that went horribly wrong? Does that form part of your investigation? There's also been, we understand, a raid on a nearby traveller camp in the area. Does that form part of the investigation at all?
Okay, so as I've said a number of times, we're keeping our options completely open in terms of motive. We do not at this stage know what the motive was. Her dog was unharmed, still at the scene when we arrived. I'm genuinely considering all possibilities at this stage. Our business as usual policing continues in this area and throughout the county, so it's important people don't leap to too many conclusions when they see our routine police activity, which of course must continue.
Has there been any involvement from the IOPC in this?
No, there hasn't.
Are you looking again at reports of indecent exposure non-intel a couple of weeks ago?
I'm hugely grateful for all of the information being provided by the public. As many of you will be aware, we're receiving a huge amount of information. It's massively important for us in piecing together what may have happened. Probably not appropriate for me to provide a running commentary in response to each of those many matters, but yes, they're absolutely logged within our system and being assessed for relevance in relation to this inquiry, and of course will be pursued whether relevant to this inquiry or just our normal policing duties.
Kit, I think you're next up.
As I say, we don't understand the motive at this case, which of course is a challenge for the investigation. I of course acknowledge that it will have an impact on the local communities. That famous case that you reference is quite close to here. But just for clarity, that is a case with an individual convicted serving a prison sentence. That conviction has been tested by the courts of appeal. But as I've said a number of times, we're keeping our assessment of the motive completely open at this stage. We're not going to be blinkered in any way.
Are asking people to be cautious. What level of threat, what's your assessment of the threat to members of the public in this case? And what can you do to reassure people who are out now walking their dogs and going about their daily lives?
Well, this is a awful incident, but it is a incredibly rare and isolated incident, not linked at this stage to any other offences. Of course, it's natural that people will be concerned. I would encourage people to be aware of their environment around them, to be vigilant, to report any concerns to the police. And we will continue to investigate, but I think until we understand the circumstances and the motive of this attack, it's difficult to be more precise than that at this stage.
And the large area is still cordoned off. A lot of people walk on their own around here. Do you think they should still continue to go out on their own if that's part of their regular routine?
I think, based on where we are at this stage, a single, incredibly rare, isolated event, people should be cautious, people should be aware, but I think people should continue with their lives.
Helena Wilkinson, BBC News again. Can you tell us if the weapon has been found and also what time she left her house on Tuesday afternoon?
It's probably not appropriate for me to get into too much fine-grained detail of the investigation. We are, of course, investigating those issues. There's a large, as you've heard, search strategy ongoing, looking to try to recover weapons. We're, of course, trying to establish her precise movements, but I don't think it's appropriate for me to get into that level of detail today.
Mike, Radio Ken, could there be a sexual motive behind this attack? Are you carrying that out as a line of inquiry?
As stated, there are a number of potential motives. We do not at this stage understand what that motive is. I'd be lying if I didn't consider that as one of the many possibilities, but as I stress, I'm keeping an open mind. We don't wish to be blinkered at this stage.
Andy Robinson, Ferraris. How are the family coping with this? Maybe supporting family players and officers? How are they coping?
Incredibly difficult and challenging for the family. As previously stated, my huge sympathy is extended to the family, and of course it's had a massive impact on her colleagues as well. Yes, we are absolutely supporting the family with specialist officers who are trained. We spent a considerable amount of time with the family and extended family yesterday, providing every support that we possibly can. They're fully cited on our activities, but of course it's hugely difficult time for them.
Hi, Jason. Could you tell us the circumstances of who found the PCSO?
We have witnesses who found Julia and have provided incredibly important, useful evidence to us. There were more than one individual, which is really helpful to us, but it wouldn't be appropriate for me to name witnesses in this case at this stage.
And the second question is, how many officers are involved in the investigation?
There are many elements to the investigation, as you can imagine. I have a large team of dedicated detectives from the Serious Crime Directorate, specialist detectives and investigating murder, supported by a wider pool of detectives from the force. But as you will have seen, we have a significant number of specialist search resources, local officers in the area seeking to provide some reassurance to the public, and then a whole range of specialist officers, for example, in relation to forensic evidence recovery.
It was 4 o'clock, wasn't it, when she was found? Do you know when the attack might have taken place?
We're of course looking at that precise timeline. We received the call shortly after 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and we're seeking to establish her precise movements to try to narrow that down.
So, no suspect and no motive. Is it fair to say then that she could have been killed by a total stranger?
I cannot rule that out. That would be incredibly rare, but I have to concede that is a possibility.
Are you looking into the possibility that there might be a connection with some of her previous policing work, perhaps in the field of domestic violence?
As I said, I'm keeping my options completely open. It's very dangerous in the early stages of investigation to get blinkered into a particular motive and possibility. I'm not ruling that out, but I'm, as I say, looking at all possibilities at this stage.
Could I just clarify something that you said? Was Julia working on that day but was working from home and not wearing uniform, but she was actually working from home?
Julia was working from home that day, as many people have during the COVID period. She was off duty, walking her dog, not in uniform at the time of this incident.
It was during her shift, during her working day, that she took a lunch break, or she was not on shift?
Potentially, but of course we're offering agile working. It's perfectly acceptable for people to have a screen break during the course of the day, so long as they complete their hours, as many employers are allowing at the moment.
She was working that day, though?
It was a working day for Julia, yes.
Just to follow on from that, can you just clarify, you said she's facing categories, also victims of domestic violence. Was that a Canterbury police station, and how are her colleagues there coping?
Yes, she was at this stage of her career specialising in supporting and safeguarding victims of domestic abuse. She was based at Canterbury, clearly less so of recent times because of COVID restrictions. Yeah, her colleagues are very shocked, very upset, but as previously stated, we're supplying considerable enhanced support to those staff, just to ensure their welfare. But yes, it's had a significant impact.
And have you changed anything about how police officers work in this half of the world? Anything changed with your policies because of fears for their safety?
No, we haven't. It's policing at times can be dangerous. You can't remove all risk from policing, but we're carrying on policing this part of the county and the rest of the county in the normal way.
Do you fear this individual might carry out another attack and might lead to another murder?
As I said, all options are being kept open. I have no information to suggest that is the case. I'm not linking this to any previous offences, so there's no indication of that being likely, but of course we're keeping all options open to us and working very hard to identify the person responsible for this offence. And again, please, if members of the public have got any information at all, however minor, please report it. It could be incredibly important to the investigation. It's impossible for me to say at this stage. Murder is a crime type with a high rate of being solved, but of course at such an early stage in such an unusual offence, it's impossible for me to be drawn at this stage.
Was she fully clothed when you found her?
It's not appropriate for me to get into details of the crime scene. It's very important that hopefully when we get to a point of a jury hearing the circumstances of this case, their knowledge is not undermined before the trial.
You are still appealing for witnesses. Anyone who saw anything suspicious on Tuesday and Wednesday. Can you give us any more information perhaps about what Julia was wearing at the time that might jog anyone's memory, and any more details of things they could look out for or think about that they may have seen?
I think we're just interested in anything from particularly a local resident that seemed out of the ordinary, that seemed unusual, that seemed different, that seemed suspicious. We've already had a lot of calls from the public, some really useful information. As I said, some may be relevant, some may not be relevant, but I'd really encourage people to tell us everything, because it helps us piece the whole story together. We can make that assessment of whether it's relevant or not, but it's hugely useful, but as previously stated, probably not appropriate for me to give a running commentary on each of those different strands, but please rest assured we're taking it really seriously.
Give us a sense of what your officers are doing today, because there's still a lot of activity in the fields surrounding where Julia is now.
They're conducting a meticulous search of the area, looking for physical evidence, looking for forensic evidence, as you would expect in a case like this. That's could prove incredibly important.
Found any signs of a struggle?
Once again, it's not appropriate for me to get into that level of detail. What I can say is we're exploiting the crime scene to the absolute maximum with specialists in many fields, and I am confident that we will extract every evidential opportunity from that scene, but I'm not going to get into detail of what we have or haven't found at this stage.
Did she suffer multiple blows, or was it just believed to be a single blow?
At this stage, I'm saying that she died from significant head injuries, and that is plural.
Are you stymied by lack of CCTV and some of the things you've come to rely on in recent years for solving crimes?
The crime scene is in, as people know, a very rural location, so that does mean some lines of inquiry are less available to us. But of course we will still consider closed circuit television. There are opportunities in the surrounding areas, but certainly not in the immediate vicinity of the attack.
One more question then, please.
Tell us, in terms of the distance from her house and where her body was found, how far away that is?
It's relatively close proximity, a few hundred yards from her house on the edge of the fields where they meet at Coltwood.
Thank you everyone for your time. Thank you.